Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Chatting with Ryan, also known as Mystic or B. I said to him before, this might be one of the very few occasions where introductions are not needed, but I'll do one anyway. The creator of Let's Talk PlayStation, one of the most consistent news shows on YouTube, in my opinion, the best source of news coverage on the entire platform. He's also done some excellent documentaries, PlayStation Home being my personal favourite, Ryan. Trophy videos, 30 platinums in 30 days. The guy's been around forever, still killing it. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you. What an introduction, my God.
You glad I went with the introduction?
You don't have to. It was a little too much. You laid it on pretty thick there, but I'll take it.
Well, I can redo it and just say, this is Ryan, he's alright, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine too. We'll go with the first one, but...
Okay. We've much to discuss, Ryan. First thing, because it was kind of a big deal, you've moved house. And
yes.
Walk through the process, because were you buying a house, and that just holds up a whole other problem with stuff?
I thought it was going to be like a 3-week thing. I gave myself 3 weeks. And what I mean by that is I didn't want to have uploads interrupted on the channel. So I was going to close on the house in December. I was buying, and I prepared 3 extra Tuesday videos. Those are my other uploads, and I can't prepare Let's Talk PlayStation early, but I prepared 3 Tuesday videos ahead of time. I thought 3 weeks is plenty. I'll be able to move in, get everything done, and boy, did I really underestimate that, because then it took 2.5 months to be finally moved in. So that was such a hassle to use up the 3 videos that I thought were my ace in the hole. I'm no channel interruptions. I'll get moved in. I might even have some time left over to play some games. Wow, that was so dumb. So I barely got it. I barely was able to stay consistent, because I've had uploads recently that were late, they didn't show up on time. And then PSVR 2 comes out. I'm oh great, a new platform I got to cover. I'm still unpacking things.
Yeah.
So
I've had a few.
It took longer.
I've had a few friends and relatives buy a house recently, and I was kind of the mindset of oh yeah, duh. You give them money, they give you keys, and then they leave you alone. I was no, it's not that easy.
Yeah, the buying process is not particularly fun, but it was just once I had the keys, I really thought I was going to get all this stuff up and done within 3 weeks.
Yeah. As in, I come from mostly a line of renting, and especially in Europe, renting always comes furnished. You move in, there's already a couch, there's already shelves, there's already dressers, everything is already there. Beds, mattresses, pillows even. Well, I wouldn't use those. I'd definitely change the pillow. But
yeah, I'm aware of that trend. Is that most of Europe?
That is almost all. I've lived in Spain, Croatia, Sweden, Bulgaria, Serbia, Ireland. It's always been, everything is there.
Jesus, you've been around the block.
Yeah. Some place you'll move in and there's already a TV for you.
Yeah, see, I get that, but it always throws me off of that sounds super convenient, but I might want to pick things. What if I don't like the style? What if I don't like this dresser? That would bother me. And that was a big part of why it took me this long, because I didn't have a lot of that stuff. So it was also a lot of ordering just a bunch of new furniture. A lot of it shows up not done, so you have to build it. By the time I'm done building 2-3 things for the day, I'm just tired.
Oh, exhausted.
Yeah. So I get the appeal of it all being there when you move in.
Yeah, I can see that. When I was speaking to somebody from Canada, and they have a similar thing to America, and he's no, I want my stuff. I want my stuff to come with me into the new rental. I don't want other people's stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned consistency. Sorry, go on.
No, so is it other people's stuff from previous tenants, or is it the landlords?
See,
who's supplying that stuff?
It's a mix, Ryan. It's like a bag of tricks. You don't know where it came from, but you're happy it's there.
Yeah, but then you have to leave it too.
You do have to leave it, yeah. It's kind of this kind of unspoken handshake. No, I leave stuff here, and then you leave stuff in the next place, and we'll all have furniture.
It's shared furniture amongst all those, all tenants, all previous owners, everything.
Yeah. You mentioned consistency. Trying to keep. How did you? Then is it only, I think, 3 Let's Talk PlayStations you've ever missed or something? Which is normally a weekly upload.
One.
It's 1. And you've been doing it, I think, is it 10 years?
10-year period. Yeah. The only one I missed was because PlayStation 5 came out on a Friday.
Oh.
And it's a brand new platform. It's a, you can't, I just had to move it. Because clearly it was far more important to start doing coverage on that, because I don't get hardware early. So, I had to wait day one to get it. And at that point, I have to allocate all this time to start covering the system. So I'm like, that's the 1 week where clearly we're not going to do it. The news is that this thing came out.
So you saying for 8.5 years, never missed a Sunday, and then PlayStation went, we got to fuck with this guy. Let's release it on a Friday.
Though they do that often. They do this very often. Dropping news right after the show comes out, or releasing hardware on Fridays. It's always that. Do
you ever have, the video is encoding, and then it's all of a sudden, oh, by the way, the Justice League Suicide Game, whatever it is, now delayed, and you're like, oh, god damn it.
I've been pretty lucky with big stuff not happening right after it uploads. Sometimes there'll be one story in there that becomes outdated pretty quickly, but it's a weekly roundup. There's 10 to 15 news stories in there. The whole thing's not going to be useless in a day. True. Most of it stays pretty relevant for, until the next week.
I'm assuming over the years, some of those days were Christmas days and New Year's days, and you were still tipping away on making sure it came out that week.
Yeah, a few of them naturally at some point get pretty close to a holiday, but it's just something I always stuck to. It's not even so much of I have to, I don't know, it's always been easy for me to do it too. I'm fine with not with it being close to a holiday or something. It's just, I don't know. Never been a bother.
It's quite admirable. I was once saying, doing platinum journeys, I'll do it every 4 weeks. Every 4 weeks, no matter the game, every 4 weeks. Then I was driving myself utterly mad, because there's this mad scramble at the end of every single month of it. It'll be done when it's done, because I'm going insane. Meanwhile, you've been doing your show for 8.5 years.
There's too many variables with that, though. News is pretty easy in that it's news.
Yeah, I suppose.
I know what to get out of it. There's no sort of unforeseen circumstance that makes an LTPS takes really long to put together. I will say recently, the one thing that takes a lot of time is the Activision Blizzard stuff.
I don't know how you're still covering that.
That news takes a while to. That's in a 10-year period. That is the one thing I can say has been really eating up a lot of time, because it's the documents that come out. And I want to try and be as informed as possible on this thing. I don't want to just spit out, a bunch of. Can we swear here?
No, you fucking may not, Ryan. No swearing on my fucking show, right?
I don't want to spew out a bunch of bullshit opinions on a topic that very obviously goes into console wars. So I try to read all these documents, and sometimes they're 200 plus pages, and then it's I'm not a lawyer, obviously, so I'm trying to be a little bit more informed and reading about the regulatory process and hearing from lawyers. And I try to cover topics as thoroughly as I can. The ABK stuff recently has been eating up a ton, but otherwise, generally news is pretty simple to cover, and, there's not these crazy variables that make LTPS hard to put together every week.
Yeah, I suppose. Thank you for being nice to me. One of the bigger projects I mentioned earlier, your PlayStation documentaries, they're kind of they don't come out often, but when they do, it's like a little Christmas present. The planning for them, how do you decide on topics? How do you decide how much depth to go into? Of course, how do you source all the footage? And then when it's actually finished, you have this just immense feeling of pride.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about most of them. I haven't done one in a while because I got burned out on them. Just because of kind of what you're getting at, is that just takes a lot to put together. I feel like the topics are kind of easy because you can just sort of think about a big moment in PlayStation history and then think, what do I want to hear more about that? Like the PSN hack from 2011, or how PlayStation Home came together, or just a platform's entire life cycle. So all of PS4 and how they were able to sort of, really turn it around from the PS3 misfortunes. PlayStation 3 itself, I find to be such a fascinating console, so that's why that got its own documentary. And sometimes when I get into them, it's like so fun to like really dive into the minutia of it. So start reading like really obscure interviews or trying to scour the internet for like footage that is not really well known or documents that aren't well known. It's just a lot of putting the time in to find that stuff.
Yeah, the PSN hack, I kind of had forgotten most of it because it had been a decade. And then when I was watching your documentary, I went, this is way worse than I remembered. This was like catastrophic.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was fun, like learning every little piece of that process and just how bad it actually was.
For that occasion, when there's one clip above all you definitely wanted to have, and that was them all standing on stage bowing and asking for forgiveness. Is there a thing of
that was actually
Was that easy to find?
Yeah, that was pretty, because it was recorded. It was a whole thing at the time. A lot of this stuff you just have to like, because it's easy to overlook it. Like just place yourself in that time. Like what were you doing? I remember a lot of that stuff. Topics that I don't remember as well, I'm a little nervous on because I don't want to like overlook anything that I just straight up like forgot happened if it doesn't come up in research, But that one I remember quite well. That when that footage came out.
Would that be an example of if I need this clip for the documentary, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to go ahead with it unless I can find that exact clip?
It would suck if I can obviously write something that like, oh, this happened, but it would really bum me out if I can't find B-roll that's appropriate for it.
Yeah.
The B-roll's incredibly important. You have to show, it's a video, you have to show what you're talking about. So there is times where I'll spend a few hours looking for just maybe 5 seconds that would appropriately fit this exact cut that I want to showcase, which is like, if in terms of time efficiency is not a very good idea, but to demonstrate what you're talking about, I find it's really important to find the B-roll that exactly illustrates the point you're trying to make. And if you bring up something that's maybe like super obscure or wasn't on camera or wasn't filmed, like you kind of have to figure out something else to put there that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned the PS3 is, I think, your favorite console?
Yeah, I always used to say PS2, but then I started to realize, like, why am I so obsessed with this thing?
Yeah,
so I was like, all right, it's probably PS3.
I can see one behind you over your head. That would be one of your PS3 consoles. How many, for the kind folks at home, how many do you have?
So that one right there is my launch model. That's my first system. My day one came with Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby on Blu-ray in North America. That's my first one. I think, oh yeah, there's one right there too. I think there's, 13. I think. They're all mostly fat models. They're not, I only have like one slim and two slims and one super slim. So they're all fat.
Now, Ryan, after about number 7, do you not think you've enough?
I'm sure I'll start slimming them down eventually. A few of them are for parts, in fairness. Some of them are 4 parts CCH-A01s, so like they're just straight up dead. There's no coming back for them. So if I'm working on one and I need like something off that board, then kind of tinker with them a little bit. Occasionally, it's not like I'm constantly working on them, but yeah, I got a lot of them.
What was your first foray into PlayStation? Was it with the PS1?
Yeah.
Any fond memories?
That was yeah, it's hot because that was definitely where I was like pretty young. So I have very few, I guess, I don't want to say not like direct memory. I don't know. I just like, there's a handful of games I definitely remember playing, but like PS1 was my first console. And then I kind of went backwards. Like I got a PS1, loved that a lot. And then I bought older systems because at the time they were then affordable and easy to buy. And it was that's like what started my appreciation for games. But for PS1, I have, I guess, fond memories of like Tony Hawk, Spyro, Tekken. Those are the handful of games that I remember the most. Those are like the core memories.
Yeah. I think it's as you get older and it starts to be you're paying for your own games and you're not getting, allowance from the parents or a Christmas present. You're actually going out and earning money and buying your own games, which have been, I know for you probably around the PS3 era. It's like, no, I worked hard, not only for the damn console, but also for every single game I have. And it kind of creates, like I said, that more of a direct memory.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like I had a huge library of PS1 games to choose from. So it was what I was able to acquire from from parents, basically. By the time you start buying your own stuff, yeah, it's a lot easier to have more games and start caring about them more or remembering them more fondly. Also remembering mistakes like buying Layer on day one.
Oh, geez, you were not one of those people, were you?
Yeah, it's a huge PS3 exclusive. We had to take what we got back then. You had to take all the copium you could get. Come on, Factor 5's dropping a new PS3 exclusive. It's gonna be good.
It has to be good because I bought $600 console. It better be good.
Yeah, I played it for a solid hour and I was like, oh man, it's not good.
Yeah, I remember reading the PlayStation magazines about Lair, and it looked like, those glossy covers, and Lair looked like this epic to rival Lord of the Rings. I went, oh yeah. Oh, and it's 6-axis.
Yeah,
it's new. It's going to be great.
I was on it big time. I bought the strategy guide too. That was really stupid.
I went for Resistance Fallen Man as my PS3 game.
Well, I mean, obviously Resistance is fantastic, but that was the day one title. Layer came out in 2007, so it was like part of that drought, that early drought of like there's nothing, PS3 has no games. Then, it's like the pre-release was starting for, a handful of these titles like Heavenly Sword, Layer, Haze, and then it's like, Haze sucks. Layer's not good. Heavenly Sword, oh yeah, Heavenly Sword's pretty good. Is far and few between. You had to take what you got.
Yeah, it was. There were so many games you would look and go, oh, this is definitely going to be great. And like you said, Haze. Even as a youngster, myself and my brother split buying that game together, and the disappointment. It was like all of our naivety and innocence was just dashed by what a train wreck the end of that game was.
Yep. You just had to try and enjoy what was on PS3 at the time.
Although in 2007, wasn't that Uncharted Drake's Fortune?
Yeah, Uncharted was the big one for 2007.
That was finally, okay, this console is worth it.
I don't know if it was that, but it was like, hey, PS3 got a really awesome game. At the time, a lot of the press was, and the whole sort of narrative, I guess you could say, was 2008. 2008 is the year of PS3 because that's when a lot of games were finally dropping.
Oh,
and that was a
Ryan,
good year.
You're giving me PTSD. I remember this now.
Yes, 2008, the year of PS3. And it was a good year, but if we're being honest, 2009 is when Sony really got their shit together because the system went through an entire rebranding. The price was finally reasonable, had a new marketing campaign, rebranded the logo, the box art. It was really like relaunching that system. And then that's when just 2009 onward was exclusive.
Do you feel that was kind of a Hail Mary attempt?
It was an all or nothing kind of thing. I mean, the company at that point was losing billions. There were certainly conversations in the background of like, what are we doing? This division for the entire Sony corporation's costing us big time. We just came off the PS2. How the hell did we do this?
Yeah. How do we screw up so bad?
And the other thing is that behind the scenes, which Sony won't be as candid about, but we've had Mark Cerny talk about this on record, is that, whenever they launch new platforms, and all the platform holders do this, but they'll launch a system, maybe only a year goes by, and they'll start the very early phase of looking at the next hardware. And part of that process is doing a post-mortem on what you just launched. And so Mark Cerny around 2008 was, a part of that post-mortem for PlayStation 3 and being like, man, this was brutal. This did not do very well. even had Andrew House also mention this during a Wired interview or something, where he said there was just a lot of complications or something. He's being a little bit, they're holding back. I'm sure there were very tough conversations at Sony behind the scenes about how they totally fucked up that system.
Yeah.
There's just no getting around it. Like, they just really shot themselves in the foot with so many decisions right off the bat on that thing.
Yeah. It was, it's kind of, I do remember the whole talk of, should we shut down the PlayStation division because it's just hemorrhaging money.
I'm not sure how serious those talks ever really got, but I'm sure it came up every so often.
Yeah.
During those tough times.
And because they stuck at it, they end up turning it completely around PS4. They went, okay, $400. And I don't care if it's not the most I don't care if it's not a supercomputer. It's going to be affordable. And it's going to be easy to make stuff on. It's going to be all this PC architecture. And then they repeat it for the PS5, although that's a bit on the pricey side. How do you think that, PlayStation's future, they're kicking ass at the moment. Do you think it's going to continue throughout the entire generation?
For the most part, I'd say they're looking pretty good. It's something where they are making more money than they ever have before. There's external factors at play that I think the company has to be very mindful of. But for the most part, I'm bullish on this thing. They've been doing very well, and there's an incredible amount of investment going around. Sony's spent a ton in areas that maybe a lot of people don't care about, like mobile, PC live service, but these are all growth vectors. It's just they're doing all that stuff, but all the first-party teams are growing. They're all getting more investment. They're all taking on second projects. I mean, these things take time, but we're kind of entering this second part of PlayStation 5's life where a lot of these titles will eventually start getting shown off, released, and we might be able to have a conversation then 3-4 years from now and see how all these titles did. But ultimately, they're planning on selling a ridiculous amount of PS5s for the next calendar year. So it'd be hard not to look at them right now and think that it could go south that quickly, but they're looking good.
Is it 18 million they wanted to sell?
Well, 18 million for the remainder of this calendar year, and then the rumor is that they would like to do around another 30 for the next one, which would be a insane amount. Now you're gonna sell most of those though during like that holiday quarter.
Yeah.
We're talking about 7-8 million they could possibly do in that quarter alone, but it's still a lot. It's an insane amount of systems. And when you look at Sony's financial reports for the games and network services division, and you stack it up against other companies in the same business, I mean, they oftentimes break records every quarter in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's a previous record that they set or a record across all other game companies, the amount of money they make is insane.
And it's no longer just about selling a copy of a game. Now it's all the other stuff, DLC and not so much expansion passes, but Game of the Year editions or porting it to PC.
It plays a role.
Yeah, and PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Extra. I think Extra is it Extra or has it been Premium that's been a big success?
Well, they don't have like a straight up breakdown on that thing, but what we do know is that very clearly enough people are upping their subscription to offset any sort of downturn in subscribers, which is what they have seen. They have not hit their COVID peak of 48 million PS Plus subscribers, but at the same time, the report shows that they're making more money.
Yeah.
So that means enough people have upped their subscription. I don't expect them to ever actually give us a breakdown of how many users have upped beyond Essential, but we do know that they're making more money with less subscribers.
Yeah. And one of the things they're doing, like you mentioned about reinvesting into all their studios, kind of doubling down, allowing them to, Insomniac, I don't know how many projects they're doing. Naughty Dog are doing a couple. I believe Sony Santa Monica are now going to be doing a couple. The God of War Ragnarok is finished. They're kind of like splitting off and allowing them to explore other options. But even Ragnarok is the recent kind of big success, and that was a budget of, is it like around 200 million in total between development and marketing?
It's somewhere around there. It's a lot of money.
And they made it back in what, a week?
Well, they're one of the few publishers that can invest that kind of money and actually see it back in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah. Back to you before I get on to other stuff about PlayStation. You've done something now twice, which I think is utterly absurd. 30 platinum trophies in 30 days. Number one, Ryan, why do you like pain so much? Number two, Ryan, why did you do it? Number three, Ryan, how immense was the planning?
I was pretty candid about the intro of the first one where I'm like, I don't get to, like, the videos are about PlayStation, but I don't really get to play the games as much for the videos, right? Like, it's news stuff, it's documentaries, like, it's not quite conducive to, like, I'm not let's playing these games, I'm not streaming. So the whole point of that first one was, this is an excuse. Let me play 30 something games in a month, and I get to, because they were all kind of titles that I wanted to do, but then I had to throw some things in there that are a little bit silly and more on the, I guess, fun side for the viewer. So I wasn't necessarily wanting to play Toro, but it was in there, right? I didn't want to play The Wolf Among Us on three goddamn PlayStations at the same time. That's not really how I would want to play that, but, you know, I figured it was a good excuse for content, and I get to play games. Planning wasn't nearly as much as I think some would think. It was just a matter of like coming up with a short list of games that work, because that's another part of it that I had to outline right away. I'm like, look, we get it. There's a bunch of bullshit on PSN that makes this very achievable. Mm-hmm. Very achievable. I think Brian did, 100 platinums in 24 hours? Because it was just a bunch of, that bullshit. So you have to say, like, right away, it's not those games, but it will be stuff that, on average, it has to be done at least one per day. So I'm like, okay, titles that take a few hours to, at the worst, 8 or 12, right? And even 8 hours is like, that's bad for 30 platinums, because you hear 8 hours and you're like, oh, that's a work shift, but that's just not how it works. It's not, it's an estimate.
Setting up the camera, there's taking breaks, there's checking footage afterwards, there's taking down stuff. It's like multiply that, add 50%.
Right, that adds an unnecessary amount. But let's say you're not even filming that. Let's say you just want to do this. It's still something where that's an estimate being given online. And I find, I don't know if it's probably a combo of both. Me being a bit slower and their estimates being too optimistic because they've already done the game. So just in their head, they're like, oh, I already did it. It should take somebody else 8 hours. It's just never how that works. It's never how. I always take longer. I had 50% to the estimated time now. It doesn't matter where it is, PSN profiles, Power Picks, or PlayStationTrophies.org. I don't care. If I read a guide and it says 5 hours, I'm like, oh, so that's going to take me 7.5?
Yeah, I add stuff too. I was looking up a guide for Modern Warfare 2, and it said 15 hours. And I was like, grand, maybe
no chance.
25. I got stuck in that pit for like a long time, and they're like, no, it's easy. Just I'm slow. I can't do this, folks. I'm in my 30s. Let me play on easy and just sit back and relax. But yeah, I had time.
I try to enjoy them.
Yeah.
I want to enjoy the games too. Like, that is a part of it, shockingly.
Yeah.
So like, I'm slow. Like, I like to search everything. There could be no trophy that says you have to like spend so much time in one room and search all the, and find all the collect. But I just like doing that stuff naturally. That's how I play. Yeah. So
one thing I find that kind of ruins like the fun of a game at times is following a collectible guide, especially a video version, because it's like play the video, stop the video, play the game, find the thing, play the video, stop the video, play the game, find the thing, and all the kind of mystery, like you sort of going into a room, just exploring it, having a good time. That kind of gets. It's like not one of my. It's not as fun. No, it kind of kills the fun of it.
It's not as fun if it's a collectible trophy that demands every collectible. Now, there are some games, I haven't seen many that do this, but I love when they're like, just get 70% of them. And I'm like, oh my God, whoever came up with that idea is so awesome, because it means as long as you're pretty thorough, you'll get it naturally. Mm-hmm. You don't have to follow a guide. You can just, because I've never in my goddamn life played a game and I found all the collectibles on my own. Never happened. Unless they were just like straight up out in the open like Spyro. I mean, if we're talking, they're out there, they're incredibly easy to find. You know, Jak and Daxter only has like a few precursor orbs that are stupidly placed, but otherwise, if we're talking about most games, I've never found all the collectibles on my own. So I like when the handful of games I've seen do this, they're like, the gold collectible trophy is just 70% of them.
Yeah, is
like
it
Control
Horizon
did that.
Forbidden West that does it?
I don't know. I don't think Forbidden West has one. I think the one I remember recently was Control. Control's like collect nearly most of them, but there's just so much in there that you're bound to get it naturally. I think it's like 50%. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm so over collectibles. I don't understand why you as a developer think for me as a player this is fun, because I have to get all the collectibles for your trophy. And I've said that I don't think there should be a trophy assigned to collectibles at all. I think that the collectibles should be good enough on their own. Like, for example, in God of War, you find a bit of lore about the history, and you're just happy to read it and learn more about the world. I don't need a trophy attached to it. I'm happy just, the collectible itself should be worth the effort of getting. Don't have 100 collectibles, have 10 and make them good.
Just 10 really good collectibles.
Yeah.
But see, now 10 doesn't sound like a lot, though. So that I would think it'd be weird to not have a trophy for them. Because 10's not demanding. 10 is not demanding. But if you do 50, 50 is not bad either, depending on the length of the game and also how easy it is to find said collectible. When you do 100, now we're getting in the territory of I need to follow a guide very closely. That's why I like the 70% thing. Because it's just such a good compromise of there's a trophy, but you're probably going to get it as long as you're relatively thorough.
Yeah, I think the old way of doing it of, what's God of War, Ragnarok 320 collectibles, and like, this is not the way to do it, folks. This is not the way to do it.
Well, there isn't one for that, is there? I actually haven't finished it yet. I mean, I beat the game, but I don't have the platinum yet. But I only think I have a few left. There's no collectible ones, is there? I think there's one, right? It's for like the flowers.
I've been told there are collectibles. I'm actually on media blackout. In fact, when I was watching one of your videos and you were doing a kind of a recap of the year, and you showed one clip of God of War Ragnarok, I was like, sorry, Ryan, I'll save this for next year.
I don't blame you at all. Okay, so that's a good thing that you bring up, though. I can't stand when like something comes out and that's just somehow like the seals are open, now everybody can just share all this footage. I don't like that. So if you're ever watching Let's Talk PlayStation, I will not use footage that is more than like
a couple hours
outside of the first hour, I guess, or I'll stick to just media trailers.
So what I was doing in my head was, I don't want to know what Kratos' weapons are. I don't want to know if the blades are back. I don't want to know if the axe is back. I don't want to know even what moves he has. So I was probably taking it to the extreme. And meanwhile, go on. Yeah,
there's like a part of Ragnarok that at this point everybody knows about. So recently I don't have a clue. I know you don't. I know. Recently I was like, all right, I guess I'll include footage of this thing that happens.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, I agree. I generally avoid, if I haven't gotten to it myself yet, I try to avoid any sort of player captured footage because I don't know what their idea of okay is to show me. So I get it.
And then if there's ever sort of fan pushback, Last of Us Part 2 was pretty bad. Hogwarts Legacy, people would go into comments and just like, so-and-so dies. And same thing with The Last of Us Part 2.
You got to get a spoiler extension.
Really?
Spoiler protection extension. Yeah, well, I don't know what browser you use, but on Chrome, there's like a spoiler protection thing that you can do, and you just enter in a bunch of keywords, and it even works on images where it just kind of tries to scan the web page, and it'll just put a big black like border on it or a red border or something, so it clearly shows that that's a spoiler.
That's a fantastic idea.
I've used it for a few things.
Speaking of The Last of Us, HBO's season of The Last of Us has now wrapped up. All of it is aired, episodes 1 to 9, covering the story of the first game. Overall, you said it was, very well done, and
I like it a lot.
You liked it a lot?
Yeah. I got issues with it, but I the thing is, I'm also mindful of, like, I don't watch a lot of TV and a lot of, like, movies, so I know maybe my opinion's not the best here, or rather one to
From
take
my understanding,
seriously.
you've actually said in one of your videos you don't like watching movies.
It's not that I don't like I just don't watch enough of them, right? So I'm not going to sit here and act like some sort of critic that has, like, a wide range of, like, tastes that, I don't know. It's just something where, like, I'm probably not the person to listen to for movie opinions or like long running TV shows. Having said that, from somebody that played the games and that was extremely nervous about its adaptation, I can't believe they did it as well as they did it. Mm-hmm. There's just a few things that I would have liked to see them do.
Yeah, I was so relieved during the very first scene. When they're doing this kind of interview thing, and I would, whoa, ye feckers got a studio audience, and the cameras look nice, and I recognize some of these actors. This is, like, prestigious. I was like, okay, HBO, you've thrown all the money you have at this. I can relax.
But you see where they save money is my problem. So they only gave this thing 9 episodes. It could have gotten a little bit more. I don't want a lot. And I'm sure how any company that, I mean, now they see how well this thing does, and we already know that season 2 is going to be, like, multiple seasons. Mm-hmm. That could be 2, that could be 3, but now it's something where I'm sure they're like, oh, okay, so now we're going to do, like, 15, 20 episodes a season. I don't want them to overdo it. 9 seemed a bit short for me, though, for season 1.
Also, strange number. Very few shows are 9 episodes for a season. It's normally kind of the even numbers. Either it's an 8 or it's a 12, sometimes up to 15 or 16. But 9 was such an odd number. And there are...
I don't know if that's common or not.
Fair enough. What parts do you think that they skimped on some of the budgets with kind of backgrounds or some of the CG, or is it that it was just the number of episodes? You felt that they could have spread out more?
I just think that, and it's tough, right? Because the only way I can look at it as somebody that's played the games, and from what I see from folks that have not played the games, they view it differently. Mm-hmm. They don't sit there and... I haven't seen many people that have not played the game say it feels rushed. But if you play the games, it's hard to not feel like that, because it almost is like a checklist. Like, yeah, it's incredibly faithful to all these, like, big moments and big scenes, but it feels like you just get all of those in an hour and nothing in between, because you lose all the gameplay. And it's like, it's not even something where it has to be action sequences. You just miss these, like, cool down moments of searching a building, and there's a bunch of dialogue that naturally comes up between Joel and Ellie, and there's a little bit of that in the show, but the fact that you have hours of that in between these big cutscenes, right? So, like the Jackson episode, it's just hard to not think that felt fast, because they just, like, hit 3 or 4 big key moments in, like, 50 minutes that could have, like, if that was 2 episodes, you could have not skipped the part where Ellie runs off. And that creates a certain level of conflict of, oh, now we have to, here's a little bit of action. Doesn't have to be unrealistic where Joel's knocking out 50-something dudes, right? But let her run to the house, do that whole sequence where they chase after her, a few raiders get shot, build some tension. There's just a lot of those moments where they jump over the gameplay.
Yeah, and the university, another example of that. Because in the game, it's a long section, and like you said, those cooldown moments. In fact, one of my favorite moments in the entire game is when, you're doing a bit of searching around, Ellie's on the horse, and then they're just talking about, oh, did you ever go to university? And he went, no, we had Sarah Young. And then she's asking, like, were you married? And then Joel kind of goes, oh. And then Ellie says, too much? He goes, too much. Okay. And it was like, they're trying to get to know each other a little bit better, but Joel's like, I'm not there yet. And she's like, and she could sense that, and she just dropped it. And I went, oh, but that's like you said, that's the cool down moments that we didn't get.
Yeah. I mean, there was some of it, right? Mm-hmm. But just not enough, I feel. And yes, I would agree that there was not, like, enough, like, action. Like, we only had a handful of infected scenes, and that's fine. It's the infected are kind of a backdrop to the entire story. They're not the forefront. This is not like a zombie show, right? It is a human show, a relationship show. I get that. I think it would have gone a long way to have just a little bit more of that tension in between.
Yeah. Do you have high hopes for the other adaptions they're doing? I think Horizon, God of War, and Ghost of Tsushima are on they're getting all their own stuff.
Yeah, Gran Turismo.
I don't understand how they're going to fucking do that. I don't know. What's the story?
It's a real life story is the thing. It's based on Jan Mardenborough. I think I said his name right. But he's that real life player that won from the GT Academy. And there was also kind of a tragedy that happened during that process. So some people, it's a real story.
I did not. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think it's easy to look at it and go, fucking Gran Turismo, how are you going to turn that into a story? But it's based on the Gran Turismo Academy and the real person that went through it. But I look at each one of these individually. My sort of like, I wouldn't like look at all of them and be like, oh yeah, they're each one individually. Who's funding it? Who's involved? There's just no way I'm going to sort of have any confidence on all of them at a bird's eye view. Like I didn't think the Uncharted movie was bad, but you can see how it could be that, where it's like, okay, kind of a fun action flick, but this doesn't feel, it's clearly not very true one-to-one and then you get something like Last of Us.
Yeah.
So my nervousness with something like God of War or Horizon is that they have to sidestep what those things are really good at, which is crazy huge action and, the sort of bigger than life creatures or robots in the case of Horizon.
And if you to recreate that, it's going to be so goddamn expensive.
I would selfishly prefer both of ththose to be movies.
That's, in fact, I was going to say to you about Ghost of Tsushima, that's going to be a movie. And I went, that sounds better. Because if you...
see, that might be a good TV show because it's a little bit more grounded in reality.
See, this is where we differ. I think Ghost would have, if I want all the money at it for just this one, 2-hour epic, samurai movie where every frame is just glistening.
Yeah.
And I think if you take that money, spread out over 10 episodes, you're not going to have this, much like, The Last of Us. I'd rather just put it all together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge preference on Tsushima, but I get what you're saying. Just I think Horizon and God of War would maybe be better served as just these tighter 2-hour experiences that get this sort of MCU level crazy action sequences that I just can't see a show doing that.
No.
I mean, I know Game of Thrones went kind of nuts with some of those scenes. I know it's possible, but I just can't have any confidence without knowing exactly how much money's going into it, who's involved. I think Cory Barlog said it best recently, where he feels like there's an immense amount of pressure now, having come off of how good The Last of Us was and how faithful it was. So
yeah, they all kind of have to go back to the script and we got to be better before we start the cameras rolling. We got to make sure this is on point. Yeah,
drop the shit.
Go on. 2 final things, Ryan. New York City. I have a fascination with this. You lived in New York State. Have you? And you said one of your friends works. Say, go on.
Yeah, so I'm in Western New York.
Western.
So I'm on the far. I'm about as far away from New York City as I could be, but I have a friend that lives there. He works in the city. He lives in Manhattan. I was there last year to visit him, so that's the extent of my experience with the city.
Okay. All right. So you don't play Spider-Man and go, whoa, there's my friend's apartment.
Not quite, but I think his group of buildings are I think they're sort of recreated in the game. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And they've class.
It's a very accurate retelling.
Yeah, I've spent years playing games, watching all these great movies about New York City and going, and in fact, New York City's iconic right angle makeup. There's some debate about where they got that from. And my home city of Limerick, Ireland, also has the same right angles for portions of it. And it's deemed that actually the person who's designed New York City stole the idea from this little tiny Irish town.
Really?
Yeah. And then went, oh, I'll do it.
Is that just rumor, though? Or is there any truth to it?
The idea is that they were meeting for some planning event, and like they just happened, the guy from Limerick was like, happened to have these plans for this city that's at right angles. And then the guy was also at the event, and then he left off to New York City, and lo and behold, New York City is all right angles.
So, okay.
Yeah, I think we're always going to claim like, yeah, definitely copied tiny town in Ireland.
Yeah, nobody's at fault here.
Last thing I want to ask you. Channel's kicking ass. Doing probably better than ever. What do you think is going to be the future of channel?
Probably more of the same. I don't know. I think we're kind of in a not autopilot mode, but I like where it's at. It's been a little slow lately, just in that there's a bunch of topics I'd like to get to, and they keep getting pushed, which I don't like doing, but I'm hoping that I'll eventually hit all these ideas that I want to hit over time. And it's all kind of similar stuff to what I've done before, but I think the general outlook is always trying to cover the future of the company, obviously, and that's going to be like your Let's Talk PlayStation and any sort of like urgent news videos about something big that Sony's doing. But the thing that always gets me excited is everything that's behind the present, right? Like looking back at PlayStation history, or exploring more obscure topics or ideas or things like that. It's just a lot of that stuff, right? I get really excited about those things. Like recently with like PlayStation 3 Online, like I love doing that every year.
Those videos were good. Every time I see another PS Online, I was like, oh no, how is this thing still working?
Yeah, I like doing stuff like that, and so it's a lot of exploring the trenches of PlayStation history, as I'd like to call it. So
yeah,
a lot of that
I
stuff.
think you're like my go-to source. There's only probably, like I'd say, probably Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols is pretty knowledgeable when it comes to the PS4 generation. But okay, obviously Mark Cerny is probably the most knowledgeable person. But you're kind of been able to dilute the information and give it back to an audience. Is like, okay, I'm going to help you understand this and why it's important. I think you're kicking ass.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Ryan. Folks, head over to Ryan's channel. You've already been there. I know you've been there. But Ryan, thank you very much for your time. And I don't know. See you around.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.